got the end of day 4 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 3, Phase 1. We've been listening to the live evidence of Sara, who was a woman who was deceived into a long-term intimate relationship by the undercover officer James Thomson. He was the cover name James Straven, stole the identity of Kevin Crossland. I'm joined by Donal O'Driscoll of the Undercover Research Group, and off-screen is Jessica, who doesn't appear on screen for anonymity reasons. Donal, what do you make of today's hearing?
It was powerful. It's like every time you hear a story, particularly from the women who've been deceived, you just come away going, don't need, just like, what were these people like? And, we've just had a litany, starting with Vincent Harvey, Vincent Miller, and now we're hearing about Straven, and it's just like, the progression just gets worse and worse. Just when you think you've heard it all, you get landed with, what a nasty piece of work. I'm still. I've read the statement. I've read the other statements. I'm still digesting just how vile all this is, and and that's on top of all the other stuff that's coming around this. He was clearly a fantasist, the highest order, but he left a lot of damage in his wake. I think Sara did excellent, just calm, straightforward delivery. Clearly, he impacted her hugely, but she delivered, gave real truth to it.
Yeah, it was particularly gross. I mean, the emotional manipulation that Thomson engaged in, which literally for 17 years left Sara feeling guilty and that she'd betrayed him in some way. I mean, just appalling. Jessica, what did you make this afternoon?
Yeah, it's really difficult to listen to, and although I've been there and said it myself, it's harder to listen to the other women talking about the particularly the intimate sexual details and that, but also the manipulation. It's like he did not need to do just the unnecessary cruel things that he did and treat her the way that he did, and the damage to someone's self-esteem. Starting a relationship with someone else, but then gaslighting her and saying, they're best of friends, but he can't have a sexual relationship, and then goes on to start one with someone else. Again, I mean, like Sara said, it's layer upon layer, and one of the things that really, I think, the more that you hear and the more stories that you hear, are things that the SDS, it was what a fucking joke, and what it was it was a jolly, they were all getting these holidays, they were all having all these relationships, they were getting paid overtime, for doing absolutely fuck all useful work. The whole thing is just it's sickening, and the more and more I listen, the more and more fucked off I get, and therefore the more I swear.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think he didn't have to do the things. So many of the things he did, whether it was the international travel, whether it was the sexual abuse of women. We heard a little bit this morning about his infiltration of Croydon Hunt Sabs, but it seems like he spent most of his time engaged in relationships and holidays. There wasn't a lot that James Thomson appeared to do that was of policing value in any way, really. I mean, it was interesting that bringing in the other officers who had an impact on the way that he'd conducted himself undercover. That he was mentored by HM1, which is the cover name Matt Rayner, who we heard from in the last tranche, who we know from Jim Boyling. Said that you can't break in as a single man, essentially saying that having sexual relationships was part of the job. We heard a long quote from the Tradecraft manual where Andy Coles basically said, have those fleeting and disastrous relationships with activists. I mean, it was so incredibly gross.
And I think one of the things Sara pointed out was just there's no thought about the impact such a breakup would have. So there's a lot of this, you will have a short fleeting relationship, is what Andy Cole said. There's other ones, you shouldn't have had sexual relationships, this is bad, this is, you're a bad police officer, you have sexual relationships because it taints your evidence. I think Sara brought it really well back to, but what about us? What about the impact that these relationships are having? Even if he wasn't an undercover police officer, it still really impacted her life. He played games, and it really came across how much he was into playing those sort of games. It's like you almost. I really got the impression of somebody who's a complete fantasist, but somebody who's very convincing at bringing people into his world, at talking it up, talking the game. You know, he's talking shit to his managers. He's telling Sara lies. He's telling the women lies, and he's very good at like think. But this is the other thing that Sara really brought out. She knew there was something wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it, and that's part of what bothered her all these years. Was that something not quite right, something not there, but in the absence of actually bleeding the worst, then she had nowhere to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredibly moving. Though the last time she spoke to James Thomson was in early 2002. But it seemed to haunt her for basically the rest of her life. In 2013, she burnt all her journals that mentioned him. She burnt the letter that he'd given her. He'd written this letter after he disappeared for 2 weeks over Christmas 1999. He wrote this letter claiming that he had experienced childhood sexual trauma, which he asked her not to share with anybody. She ended up talking to her friends about it because it was such a significant part of her life, and she felt huge guilt about the fact she'd done that. She ended up burning all these things in 2013 because it was still affecting. I mean, she was married by that point, and it was still this thing overhung her life so much. So significant was the emotional manipulation that he'd engaged in. Really quite harrowing. She only found out that he was an undercover officer in 2018, and that she talked about how the effect of that, about how she finds even seeing the police to be triggering. She pointed out that was it wasn't long after that, when she first started the mediation process, that the Sarah Everard murder happened, and that in the media they were talking about putting undercover police officers in nightclubs to protect women, and how horrific that is. Yeah, I mean, I think she really brought home the human impact of this deployment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that is becoming quite, and we're hearing more and more, is that these officers didn't actually then leave the women's lives. They kept in touch. I mean, we heard particularly more sort of with Ellie, but they didn't go. They kept in touch. They kept sort of emailing and and coming back. And it's more manipulation. I mean, he seems to be particularly determined to to manipulate and just to keep on with these women in some way, sort of not happy to let them go. And also another thing that's about him, and sort of and also it was the same with HM1, is it seems that we should have been more worried about them, because it seems that the police, the undercover police, were the ones that were getting guns, and sort of him apparently going over to France to collect a gun, and again it's that sort of they actually, I think should be more scared of them than than they ever were of us. But yeah, it's just, again, it's more of the same. And I can completely understand when Sara says about the effect that it does have, the paranoia and being triggered when you see the police, and and who do you go to? Who do you go to if you need help? Because you sure as hell don't go to the police. So yeah, and I want to sort of say, I'm so, she did amazing, and that today, sort of like my I've been in touch with her, and just she's doing okay. But I mean, that's brilliant today, and just sending sort of like loads of love and solidarity to her.
Yeah, absolutely. Solidarity forever with Sara. It was an incredibly powerful testimony today.
Just thinking back on that letter where he talks about him and his friend having experienced this sexual abuse, just how casually they use that sort of stuff. It's not the first time, won't be the last time in this, but they just throw it out as if it's meaningless. It's like hearing that stuff, brings its own weight. You're expecting somebody else to carry the burden of that knowledge. He asked her not to spread it on. It's like she has to carry that burden. But for him, it's just a throwaway line. It just shows how little sociopathic or psychopathic, I don't know which is the right term, but the fact that you can actually have that little care about impact. Like if somebody told me something like that in confidence, and it has happened, it's like you you treat that with utter respect because you know the damage it can do, and for him it's just a throwaway line. But you also see this, when he starts a new relationship, he's had this really intense thing, he breaks up with her, and then she finds out in passing he's just started another relationship, and he's not even bothered to tell her. In fact, when she asks him, he's more interested in the fact that she might have seen somebody else. But even though he got his dates wrong, he tries to turn it back on her, and it's just like, oh, you sick bastard. This is those kind of, it's like you can't even own up to your ownership behavior, that you have to actually try and pretend it's something else. And when she says, oh, you're wrong, he doesn't bother to respond. It's just that's under the line, he has this really caring persona on the surface, but on the line he just does not give a shit. I think that's the real truth of this man.
Yeah, no, totally. It's it is really like the casual way in which they throw around really serious trauma in order to empathy bond. I mean, they're using this as a weapon. I mean, like it's quite breathtaking, really, how little regard they have for these really serious matters.
Yeah, and it just shows that they absolutely did know that this is the sexual abuse and the trauma that it causes, simply by telling someone something awful has happened to humans. They fully understood, how sexual trauma affects people, and yet they were perpetrating at the same time that they're using it to try and get sympathy. And, the whole thing is like they fully understood. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. They knew totally what they were doing. Anything else you want to add about today's this afternoon's hearing, or anything from today?
Yeah, we started touching on Operation Lime, which is a fascinating period. I think there's not time or space to go into just that story right now, but it's definitely something for people to watch out throughout this evidence, not just from Sara, but from the others in the run up to Straven's, or James Thomson, as we should call him. Stop calling him Straven. It's quite a story. And the other thing on that is just like, didn't seem like the inquiry did that much work. They seemed to use the Powerbase article. It's just like he gave up trying to count. Oh, they referenced our work again. Okay. It's like, hello?
Yeah. Just a friendly suggestion to the Undercover Policing Inquiry. Maybe give your budget to the Undercover Research Group. You're already basically just lifting their research and presenting it in the questioning. So you might as well just cut out the middleman. It's the Operation Lime. That was the trip down to Marseille and Bordeaux that James Thomson went on. It was a really kind of convoluted scheme to buy a gun and then have the car it was in stolen. I mean, a lot more is going to come out about that. A lot more is going to come out about his deployment. We'll be back on Monday. We're hearing from Ellie. I'll be doing a Twitter Spaces later on this evening. I'll do a recap video as well. There's an event on Sunday. Do you want to talk quickly about that?
Yes, Sunday, 2:00, Mayday Rooms, just off Leith Street. The idea is to introduce the inquiry to people who've kind of heard about it, or saw a bit of stuff but want to know more. So it's how the inquiry works, how to get involved, how to learn more, and also what we've learned. So it's 2 hours. Open discussion. A few of us will be there just presenting it and encouraging people to get involved and learn more about it.
Yeah, if you can make it down on Sunday, that'd be really great. Anything else you want to add? No. Okay, great. All right, thanks for joining us. I'll see you all again hopefully see you on Sunday. But if not, we'll be back on Monday morning. Cheers.